Hey, what's up? You're tuned into In a Pinch, the show where I come up with something last minute when the cutting room is not able to go live. Today is actually kind of a new day, a new interesting format that we're going to try out. And I'd like to share with you some of the things that I have learned in the content team process. Oh, okay, there we go. So, technical difficulties already, first thing out of the gate, but that's okay because now we've got that sorted out. So, the idea behind this episode, one of the things that I was going to talk about with our guest this week was content team design, right? And this is something that I've got a lot of experience with. One of the teams that I've put together, I've worked with New York Times published authors, Emmy award-winning journalists. I've worked with 4 Dummies authors and a number of really highly decorated content marketers within the teams that I've built and created. And it's really easy to look at this whole idea of building a content team and saying, let's just get the right people and then they're going to do their magic. But there's a whole lot more that goes into it if you want to design a team that is able to complement each other's strengths and to build off of each other and create a flywheel for the type of content that you create. So what I'd like to do is just sort of share with you some of the process that I have to find and hire the right people. But before I go into that, it's actually really important to realize that it's not just about starting your hiring. In fact, it takes a few more steps before that, where we start with the market research process and then eventually get to the point where we know how to find the right people to achieve the things that we're looking to achieve. So I'm just going to share my screen here and we'll get to it. So the first thing that I look at when I go to hire a team before I get to hiring a team is to do the market research, right? I want to find out what is everybody doing? What is nobody doing? How do we engage with those people? And what can we do that nobody else can? So when I look at things like what is everybody doing, what I'm looking at is the competitive landscape, right? What are the direct competitors doing? What are the people in the industry looking at or doing, the industry blogs that have to do with news or things like that? And what is everybody talking about? What are the things that's already on everybody's minds, right? Like the market, both the market and the competition and the publications. What's the general conversation, right? And then what's that thing that nobody's talking about? A good example of this is when I was at Shopify years ago, and what everybody was doing was they were talking about e-commerce and their features, right? What are the features that an e-commerce seller can have with their website? And what are the latest features and technologies and on-site hosting trends and all of this, right? What nobody was talking about at the time was how cloud e-commerce could be this thing that was upending the traditional structure. What was how they were giving people these opportunities, these smaller people's opportunities to start selling and creating a business that was previously only available. Nobody was really talking about this, and it made this really interesting opportunity to figure out how we were going to engage, right? What were those conversations looking like? What was nobody talking about? Now that we know that, how are we able to insert ourselves into those conversations? And then what can we do that nobody else can, right? That's the 4 sort of ideas there. And if I look at a little bit further, right? So when I go to do the research, I'm looking at reading 200 blog posts a day, or not a day, but 200 blog posts. I want to watch every webinar from every competitor. I want to read every single ebook. I listen to every podcast and basically just saturate myself with these, with the market, right? And what's happening in there. I want to understand what is happening in this space so I can start to reverse engineer that and create things that use the right packaging, the packaging that will get the most attention, but then also deliver a message that is unique from all of the others, right? So again, I want to find the most linked to and least linked to content. I want to find the most shared and least shared content. And I want to get real-time updates from tracked active sharers. So I'm going to show you a handful of these things and what that looks like. So I use Ahrefs, right? If I were to look at, for example, what are the top articles that are being linked to on a website, I can do this search in Ahrefs. So I'll do best pages by links and which pages are getting the most links here, right? So in this example, I'm using Content Marketing Institute, and we can see here, this page, the home page, gets 75,000 links. Okay, we're not going to really worry about that one too much. We're not going to worry about the second one here too much because we're not going to compete on those. But what do we have here? What is content marketing? Okay, that's an interesting subject. Developing a strategy, also another interesting subject. And what we can see here from this meta-analysis is that we can start to see just at a glance what these top subjects are and things that we might be able to cover as well, or what we know is going to get the most attention out of this, out of this particular market, who's linking to these particular groups. The next thing that I like to do is to also see what's getting the most and least amount of shares. So if we go over here into Content Explorer, again in Ahrefs, and type in the website, we can see which pieces are getting the shared the most, right? So what is content marketing, online video marketing? And you go through there and you can start to see within the last 6 months what's going to get the most, or what's been getting the most attention, because this gives you an idea of what's happening now, right? If the links and the inbound links are telling you what's popular sort of over time, this is going to tell you closer to what's happening in real time and what's the conversation happening like nowadays. Now, this is important because I need to understand where the market's head is at, right? I need to understand what's top of mind for everybody who's here and what we're trying to get out of the conversation, right? So that's that, right? So I want to look at that. I want to see what's the most shared, least shared, most linked to, least linked to, and I want to get real-time updates, and I want to track the people who are actively sharing this stuff. So again, we'll use Content Marketing Institute as the example, and we can now do an advanced site search on Twitter here, right? Where we do the search and we can see content that's being shared from this website, right? That's pretty cool on its own. You can also do some advanced features, right? And we can see here, somebody just updated in real time. We can do an advanced search, and we can also insert the website here, right? And then we'll give it some filters of engagement with a minimum likes of, we'll say 10, right? Once we have that, we're going to get a string that will show up in here, and we can actually create a zap. Now, this is all going to tie back to hiring in just a minute here, I promise. But this is going to give you, we can then take that information and create a zap. And this zap will say search a mention in Twitter. So it's going to basically replicate what we have here. And we're going to say Content Marketing Institute, minimum faves of 10, right? And then what we're going to do is basically say add a user to a list that we've created, right? So in this case, I've created a list that's called Power Sharers. And what this does is it adds people who have shared content from that website that I'm looking at, that I'm trying to track. It adds those same people to a list. So now I can see in real time what are real people who are sharing my competitors' content. What are the other things that they're sharing? So we can see here, somebody shared something from Marketing Land. Somebody shared something from Search Engine Land. We've got Forbes is in here somewhere, VentureBeat. And we can start to get a sense of where the market, right, our ideal customers are going to be spending a lot of their time and attention. Now, Once we have that, we can start to dissect the pieces that are being shared. We can start to understand the language that's being used, and we can get a feel for that, what's grabbing people's attention, what's engaging these people, and how are we able to what can we do to start creating content that gets that attention, right? So if I scroll back over here, right, this gives me a sense of all of this in real time, right? What's working on a very high level with the links and backlinks, what's working within the last 6 months, and then what's happening in real time and who is sharing this stuff. That all comes into play a little bit later on, but let's move forward, right? So again, we have this information. We've got the tweet there. What we have, once we have all of this, right? Once we're starting to embed ourselves into this market and start to understand what's happening in this space, right? I create something what I like to call the code. And the code is a set of principles that codifies the rules of engagement for that particular market. So in this case, this is one example of a code, right? We have our primary rules here are don't paint idyllic pictures, don't talk down to the reader, opinions are BS, do the research, tell a story. These rules were not created arbitrarily. These were created as a byproduct or as a response to what I saw in the market for this particular client that I was doing this for. Because what I noticed was that a lot of the websites, they were painting idyllic pictures for the reader, right? If you do this, then this will happen. It's not true. They were saying, this is what we think is the case, and it wasn't backed up in any research. There were people who weren't telling stories in a way that were making this information interesting. And that's what this is. It's a response to that. The code that you create is a response to the market research, which gives you a foundation to find the right people to when you start assessing authors, when you start interviewing authors, when you start looking for the people who are going to do what you to help you execute. This is the foundation of that work, right? So once I understand that, right? Once I understand what's happening in the market broadly, what's happening in real time, we've created a code. Now the next question that I have to ask, and this is before we hire still, what formats do I want to create? So in this example, we'll say we want to do some Business 101 articles, some news and trends articles, some case studies, some downloadable assets, and maybe an interactive tool. These are the formats that I want to create. We're going to stick to these and stick to these primarily. Now, I need to understand this because I want to understand I want to balance out my calendar, and I want to have an idea of what's going to be published and when. So the question that I then ask is, how often do we want to publish these things, right? Business 101, we'll do those 2 to 3 times a week. We'll do news and trends daily. We'll do case studies once a week, and so forth. Now that I understand how often I want to publish these things, now I can start to ask myself, well, who's going to create it, right? So with the Business 101, I might have one specialist and 2 generalists if we're going to post 2 to 3 times a week. And that specialist might talk in a very specific area where the generalists are able to cover multiple topics, right? I want a news and trends section, and we might do news and trends every single day. I need somebody who has the very specific skill set of being able to turn around content fast, right? Good content, tells a good story, do it fast, and get it out the door, right? With minimal editorial necessary, minimal spelling, all of that. We can get a pretty much published piece out the door quickly. Next, I want to do case studies, right? And with case studies, I might want to have a journalist who has this background in interviewing that can help me get the best out of this particular subject that I'm trying to interview. Another great example of this, when I was at Shopify, I worked with a journalist. He had won several awards as a journalist, and we ended up having him do case studies. Now, what we had noticed in the research was that everybody's case studies were company X works to company Y and sees Z results. Very standard stuff, very typical, and very boring. It was very easy to ignore. You can imagine when you look at the website, yes, this case study is going to say we had this level of success. So what we wanted to do with that as a response to the research that we were finding was create these Rolling Stone style interviews. And basically we'd profile these companies and these founders to where they were able to tell a really interesting story, not about the problem, but what led to the problem, right? So really good example of this, we had a founder who, if we went, the company X works with company Y and sees the results, the setup was they were out late at night. He got a message from his chief technical officer. The server room, pardon me, the server room was on fire. And then after the fire, they moved to cloud e-commerce, and now they don't have to worry about that anymore, right? Interesting on its own, interesting enough, but what the context of that is they got the call at 3:00 in the morning on the night of this founder's bachelor party. It changes the entire frame of reference as to what the post is about, and it helps the reader see themselves in that scenario because everybody has some crazy situation. So with the journalist, we were able to pull that information out of that person, and it was very emotional in some cases. And the reason why that was valuable was that we got to know people on a very real basis, and it's because of who we had hired to do that job and what we knew that job was going to be and the type of person who should be able to do it, right? So understanding the types of content that we want to create helps us to then zero in on the types of people who are going to create it, right? Downloadable assets, writing a short form post in a long form ebook, two totally different things, especially if you want to keep people engaged for, the half hour it's going to take to go through the thing. If you really want to go do about it, right? Do it well. And then an interactive tool, right? Like if this is something we know we want to create, who's going to create it? Maybe we figure that one out a little bit further down the road. Now, the next thing that we want to ask before we hire people too is how do we get these to feed each other? So in this particular instance, we might have case studies, inform the content calendar. We've got these conversations happening with real people. What are the business problems that they have? What are the things that they're seeing in trends? What kinds of long-form content might they need, and what kinds of tools might they need to have developed? The person who's doing the case studies in this particular case, they need to be able to get this information out of the person too, without necessarily that being the thing that goes into the case study itself, right? We want to make sure that we can get all of this information so it can feed the rest of the conversation. Did this when I was at Shopify. Again, we had our weekly stand-up meetings, and our case study person would tell the rest of the team what some of that conversation was like, and it would help inform the rest of what we were trying to create. So I want to understand that. I want to have that model worked out in the very beginning, and I want to have this culture that I'm already sort of building a framework around for when people come in, and when I hire the right people, we're able to do this. This also gives me a sense too, just to say this, talking about culture, this gives me a sense of the type of culture I want to create, right? And when I go to hire later on, if I know the vibe that I want to have created within my team, when I go to hire and I have those conversations with people, I can get a sense of who it is, the dynamics of the people who are going to be on the team, and what's that interaction going to look like back and forth, right? So where do I find creators? Right? We've got two methods here. We've got the pull method and we've got the push method. So pull method, this is where you put in the job posts, right? I've always had really good luck with the ProBlogger job board. I've had really great success with the Superpath job board recently. And just posting on my own social media, right? Or asking people that you know to post on their own social media. And when I ask for that, when I get that, I ask for a handful of things, which we'll talk about in a second. And then the push method, which is looking at industry websites, looking at other social media sites, and I'll show you some examples of this, where you can find people who are really good at the subject that they're looking at, or the subject that they're talking about. So, for example, right, if I go back over here, part of the push method, right, is I might go over here to LinkedIn and say content marketing, right, and then sort by posts. and then see all the posts from people who have been talking about content marketing. And what's interesting to me about this is maybe I look at who's got the most engagement or who's got the really great ideas, right? And I could start to change this. I can, filter this down, date posted in the last 24 hours, past week, past month. But I might want to just take this subject and see who's creating really cool stuff around this, and then maybe reach out to them. Say, hey, you've got some really good ideas over here. I'd love to work with you on that. The other thing is if I'm going through and I'm looking for people, I might just go to the competitor's website and say, hey, I really like this piece that you put out there, and I think that we could work together, right? It's really just a matter of finding the people who fit the content that you're trying to put together. And then when I go to hire, right, when I vet creators, I ask for a few things. One, I ask them for the 3 most representative samples of their work, right? I then try to edit one sample thoroughly. I have to be honest, I haven't done this in a little while, but when I have, it's been very successful. I'll edit one piece of content very successfully. If they have really good response to that, right, then I'll share with them the content code, give them an idea of, hey, this is what we're looking to do. These are the rules of engagement with the market. Tell me what you think. And if this sounds like a standard that you want to work to, would love to work with you. And then I'll schedule an interview, right, of that short list. And what's interesting about that second and third step here is that there have been plenty of people who weed themselves out because it turns out that they didn't gel with the editorial style, right? Or they thought that the code itself was probably a little too intense and it's not what they were signing up for. Both of those are fine. In fact, that's actually a really good thing, because before you ever get to the call, you want to get to the call and have these different steps of elimination along the way where people are self-selecting as to whether or not they even want to move on to that next step. And then once you get on that interview, the idea is a lot of that conversation has already been happening up front, right? They know what your expectations are. They have a sense of your editorial style. Now let's see if you and I can just connect on a real human level. And if you're looking at it from that perspective, right? You're looking at it work first, expectations, the types of content that you want to have created, all of that, you're ideally starting to find the right people, or you're finding people who can fit within those frameworks that you're trying to put into place. And you can have a sense of the dynamic that you want people to have as well. So when you put your team together, you already have a really solid idea. There's already a great expectation from everybody as to what is going to be to work with this publication, right? And then, hold on a second here. And then that's really it, right? That's a long way of saying a lot of this. But that's really what it is when I'm looking at creating a team and a dynamic and hiring the right people. I first need to understand what it is that we're trying to create and who we're trying to create it for, right? Who's going to distribute it? That's a whole nother thing that kind of shows up in the market research. Who's going to be the best people to create this? And then how do we just vet those people and get them to like engage with us in a way that is meaningful and something that I think is incredibly valuable to have right out of the gate. Now, I'm going to just leave it here for a second and see if there are any questions or anything that you wanted to talk about, really. Just leave it in the chat and we'll discuss it a little bit further. While I am waiting, there was actually a new ad that we created for a partner called Content Harmony. They are doing some really amazing things in the content brief space, and I created an ad. This was intended originally to show before we get into the edit on the cutting room, so you can get a sense of what it is, and hopefully you like it. All right, here we go. While we wait for the edit, I wanted to introduce you to one of my new favorite tools. It's called Content Harmony, and here's why it's my new favorite. First, I hate writing content briefs just because of how much time it takes. If you want to get the information you need, you have to bounce between so many different tools. You've got the keyword data from one tool. You need to use Google to see who you're going up against. You need to know what their domain authority is. You have to figure out the average word count. What's the keyword density? What are the search trends? And so much more. And let's be honest, we don't do it all because it takes too long. Now that's where Content Harmony comes in. First, all you have to do is upload your key phrases, and its AI-assisted tool will show you at a glance the search intent of each key phrase, the average word count across all the top ranking results, how optimized the average piece is, the average links to each piece, and the average domain authority across all the competitors. And when you click into a key phrase, you get even more detailed information, such as the search intent of each key phrase, the age range of the ranking results, the SERP features, and the keyword seasonality and trends. You can also do a topic analysis and see the keyword density that you should be targeting, the outline of each article that ranks in the SERP, questions people are actually asking with information from Google, Quora, Reddit, and more, and the common external links that people are citing, your top internal link targets, high authority resources, and recent news to keep your results fresh. Also, you can get way more detailed information on each of your SERP competitors. You can see what images are ranking and what videos are also going out there. And here's the cool part. All you have to do is click any of these elements and it will automatically populate a brief, which you can then share with anyone. And finally, once you get the first draft back, you can run it through their content grader and see just how well optimized the article is. Seriously, I just started using it and it's saving me at least 2 hours a brief and has consolidated 4 of my most commonly used tools. Now, if you want to try it out for yourself, you can run 10 reports for $10. Also, you can help support the channel and get 2 months of free bonus credits when you purchase the full plan through my link. All right, now let's jump back into the edit. So yeah, that's really it. Is there anything that you would be interested in learning about as we talk about the content team design and where you might fit into the picture, or how do you find the right people? Where do you find the right people? What are you looking for? Let's talk about it in the chat. Okay, well, I think that might cover it all then, because I'm not seeing anything coming in the chat, so that's okay. And yeah, hopefully this was useful for anybody who showed up here. Again, I'm looking forward to the next episode of The Cutting Room. If you are interested, if you're not subscribed already, at the very bottom of the page here, if you're on the Content Studio's website, you can enter your email address and you'll get updates from all the previous episodes, exclusive bonus offers, and a number of other really cool things. All right, thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.